We now enter lesson 15, the last one in this workshop, Introductory to Theosophy. Here we will be speaking about the future of humanity, and one fundamental component in that future is something that the masters who gave us theosophy always recommended to us. One of them is very clear in correspondence with one of the early theosophists, Sir Alfred Sinet, who was a Breton that lived in India. This master tells you very clearly what our chiefs want, because the masters do have chiefs, you know. What our chiefs want is once and for all the establishment of the brotherhood of man, the fraternity of humanity. Now this may sound as a platitude for many people, or something that is unrealizable, or something that is really not practical to think even of that, given human nature. However, it is absolutely fundamental. If what we want is a world in peace and harmony and prosperity for everyone, there is no other way. On this, theosophy is perfectly clear and perfectly final, because it's a question of strict common sense. What has brought about all of our problems, all of our difficulties, horrible wars, the shed of blood to unbelievable extent in the last 2,000 years and the centuries and millenniums before that, has been one thing and one thing only: the disharmony between human beings, the lack of fraternity between human beings, the lack of consideration for the well-being of our neighbors, of other human beings. This is what brings us all the problems that we have. They are absolutely unnecessary. Hence the advice to set up a more fraternal way of acting has a practical connotation. There will be no wars, and there will be no suffering, and there will be none of this horror of this world. Is caused precisely by the fact that we have ignored this fundamental law, the law of brotherhood. This is a law in the universe, which hinges on the law of love, which is a fundamental law that rules the universe. By failing this law of brotherhood, we are failing the law of love, and therefore the consequences will be great and very painful. Not nice. Why do this? It doesn't make absolutely any sense. If we're going to speak about the future of humanity, then we have to have this into consideration. Eventually it will come to be, because people will realize that there is no other way. Religions and political systems had all the recourses, and they had all the time to prove their validity in terms of bringing about a world where there's harmony and well-being for everyone. And they have failed miserably. It doesn't work that way. It's not a question of system, it's a question of human consciousness. And that consciousness must be oriented towards the idea of never doing damage to anyone or anything, and to think of others before we think of ourselves. When we are ready to do something, when we are ready to proceed in a certain direction, think of others first. How is this action on my part will affect others? To what extent? Will I be creating pain and difficulty for others by achieving what I'm looking for? This is what we need to ask ourselves before we act. Let's assume that we have leaders of a country, and we have a conflict with another country, territorial disputes, or whatever it is. So we go to a negotiating table, as they call it. And when we go there, and then we start barking about what we think is right, what we think belongs to us, what we think we have a right to. And the other side does the same thing. It's very rare that we'll come to an agreement. Usually we will not. When we come to an agreement, it will be meaningless, and it will be violated, and we will have a war, a horrendous one, with all the loss of lives and the discombobulation that this type of conflict brings about. Not to speak of the cost, which is staggering. It's something that is not required, it's not necessary. See what the change would be if when we sit at that table, we ask our opponents, please tell us what your problem is. Because whatever your problem is, maybe we can help to solve it. Because we have a problem too. and maybe you can help us. Let's help each other and see what we can do to or work, in tandem, in harmony, so that we can, our hopes are fulfilled on both sides. We don't want to win at your expense. We know that that brings about a price, and it's not a nice price. So you do the same thing. We want you to win. We want you to have a good result from these meetings. We want to do that. So we're going to listen to you very carefully and see what we can do to help your problem. If you do the same thing with us on our problem, we will be on our way. We will be fraternal, and we will get results. We'll be at peace, and we'll get what we want. This is a practical consideration. When Christ in Palestine 2,000 years ago said, if you're hit on one cheek, show the other. And people think it's a platitude. It's not a platitude, it's a practical thing. Why? Because when you respond with a blow to the blow that you receive, what you're doing is recharging the negative energy that was installed to begin with. And then the other guy responds with 2 blows, and then you have 3 blows. And then you have people from your family joining you so we can beat the other guy who has his family, beating my family, and so on. And we have a conflict. But if you get hit and don't respond, the guy may hit you again, but he will never hit you for a 3rd time. Your peaceful attitude, your principle of decency will disarm completely the negative energy of the situation. So it's not a platitude, it's a practical, very pragmatic advice. Don't respond to violence with violence. When you have a problem, something that you need, think before you act. See who are you going to dispossess of. And when you have a conflict between 2 countries, or between 2 people, or whatever, sit down and discuss it. Discuss it in a sort of fraternal way, being concerned also about the other person or the other country and their destiny and their well-being. This brings about a world of peace. Nothing else, my brothers, will do. And this is strictly a pragmatic advice. It's a question of observing. It's a question. Look at what Mohandas K. Gandhi did for India. Without firing a bullet, he got the independence from the British Empire after 400 years of domination. The Indians had many revolts in which hundreds, even thousands of Indians died many times, because they rebelled militarily against the power, the might of the British Empire. They could never be successful. But when they decided that they were not going to cooperate and they were going to stop the country and not fire one bullet, even if they were shot at, and they were shot at, they would not respond. England didn't know what to do. They were not used to that. And they gave up and they moved away. And India got its independence. That message from Mahatma Gandhi was not understood by the world. He was following exactly the word of the Christ in Palestine 2,000 years ago. When they hit on you on one knee and one cheek, show the other. They were telling us, don't respond to violence with violence. It doesn't help anything, it doesn't solve anything. You may be successful for a while, for the moment. In the long run, the problem will be worse. We human beings are a little bit hard of understanding sometimes. We need to be hit several times, and we have to kick triple in the same stone many times, more than once. But eventually, hopefully, we will learn. We better learn. As you know, and we studied, in the lesson number 7, evolution of humanity occurs in 7 phases, 7 periods, known as root races. We're now in the 5th sub-race of the 5th root race. About 25,000 years from now, we'll start the 6th root race. We have no idea with absolute precision of the date. All we know is 25,000 years from now, we will be in the 7th sub-race of the 5th root race. The others, no figures have been given to us. But it will have to be a completely different humanity than the one we have right now. We still have a number of thousands of years, to get to that particular point. But eventually we're going to have to do that. And we will do that only if we understand once and for all the need to establish the brotherhood of man, the fraternity of humanity. This is absolutely fundamental. is based and is hinges upon the fact of unity, of the fact that we're really in fact all one. This is something that finds objection in many people. Observing the different states of consciousness of individuals in this world, well, they say, well, look, there are people in this world which are saintly, there are people which are criminals. How can we be the same? Well, we may not be the same at the present stage of those personalities. We may not be the same, because some have many more incarnations, and therefore they're much more mature spiritually. And they will act accordingly. Others have very few incarnations and they're still learning and they're still undeveloped. So they will be antisocial in their behavior. Selfishness will take predominance in them. It is lamentable, that's the way it is. When we observe that, it's useful to remember that we all were like that once. Some of us may abhor of crime, now we would never do that, some of us. But there was a time when we did it without thinking twice. So before we pass judgment on our brethren, which are less evolved than we are, let's think twice. It is a path that we also walk through. And it was a painful one, because karma will intervene, and the pain will be terrible until we get to understand that there are certain things in life that we don't do. As simple as that. If what we want is really to keep advancing and to have a decent life, one that is not too painful. It is said that pain is the greatest teacher in the school of life. It is a fact, because we learn through pain. We don't learn through easy times. The difficult times and the most painful times are the ones that teach us the most. And they teach us, among other things, respect for life and for the welfare of others. We are like a tree. When we look at the branches, they look separate from each other. And they're different from each other in the shape and so on. They're never the same branch. There's no clones in branches. They're all different. Now when you follow the trajectory of the branch down, you find out that they all stem from the same tree. It's just one trunk. We are one with everyone else, with everything else in the universe. Blavatsky spoke of it as the web of the universe in the second doctrine. Because we're all united. And the sadness and the pain and this possessing of some will be exactly the same for us in the long run. Because we're one with them. We are not separate. We may be separate in physical bodies as required, because we need to assert our individuality. That's a consciousness factor that human monad has to assert. But in the long run, and in the upper levels, we are all one. We, amazingly and paradoxically, we keep our individuality, we are told. But we are one with everyone else. So, before we act, think twice. Because if we do damage, we're doing damage to ourselves. This is essentially for the whole thing. It's not a question of ethics, simply. It's a practical thing. Something that will happen, inevitably. I think that lately, in the last, say, 50 years, decisive changes are taking place, which are moving us to a much more tolerant society than the one we had before. For nearly 2,000 years, we've had really a world of obscurity, and conflict, disastrous for everyone, evidently, It really stopped the advancement, both collective and individual, to a considerable extent. When religions who were teaching dogmas that didn't make absolutely any sense whatsoever, and kept everybody ignorant. This is the worst thing we can do. We said before, when speaking of the capital sin, the fundamental sin that we have, humanity, is not sex, as is implied in Genesis. It's ignorance. That is from where all our pains, conflicts and difficulties start from our profound, deep ignorance. To make it worse, by assuming that we really are not ignorant and we know better. We don't know better. We remain very ignorant. And in this late decades of the last 20th century, the last decades of the 20th century and the beginning of the now 21st century, changes have taken place not only technologically, intellectually, also in terms of spiritually. In the sense that we have realized, how important it was to eliminate prejudice, for instance, racial prejudice or prejudice in any form and way, which really divides mankind and is profoundly inappropriate. It's against the law of love to discriminate on anyone. We have no right to do that. Fortunately, it's been legislated here in the United States. Legislation was enacted back in 1968 to make sure that there can be no discrimination based on race, color, or religion, or whatever. And since then, the world has followed the example, and we are pretty much integrated now in many nations. That there will be pockets of people who still proceed in a primitive way and an adequate way. Yes, that's inevitable. But essentially and fundamentally, all over the world, 80% of the people, completely reject the idea of discrimination. And we've made a tremendous step in that. Because based on that, we had something clearly abhorrent. We had slavery. Something that is today is considered to be totally and completely inadequate, only 200 years ago was in vogue. It was okay to have slaves and mistreat them, even. Something that we should never do under any circumstances. Thank God consciousness has dawned on us along those lines. So being tolerant, and being, understanding of everyone, and at the same time, judging people and circumstances by their merits and not by what people look like is fundamental for us, and that has been happening. Still, there are many people who don't agree with that, but they're going to have to agree in the long run, inevitably, because we're moving in a direction that cannot be stopped. Why? This is the important thing to remember. Now, the Earth, when it moves on its axis, let's assume that there is a steel axis that goes from the South Pole to the North Pole like that. It has an inclination of 23 degrees. Now, when the planet gyrates on its own movement, it doesn't do it, evenly. It goes like this, like a top that is losing speed and start wobbling. The Earth has a wobble. If there was some kind of an axis pointing out from the North Pole, it would be moving like this, describing a circle in space. Each circle takes about 25,000 years. That's why it's so difficult to really observe. It's undetectable in that sense. It's very slow. 25,000 years to complete one circle. But in the process, as it moves, this axis is pointing at different galaxies as it completes the circle. So the Earth is receiving different influences. Now we're moving from Pisces, from the sign of Pisces, because those 25,000 years are normally, referred to from the point of view of the astrological signs. So we're moving from the sign of Pisces, the galaxy ruled by Pisces, into the galaxy ruled by Aquarius in the movement. Therefore, we're now beginning to receive influences from Aquarius, while the influences from Pisces are disappearing. This implies that different spiritual egos are incarnating. Not everyone incarnates, we are told, all the time. People incarnate when it's important for them and when it's useful for them to incarnate. When the period the humanity or the world is going through is favorable to what they need to unfold. In the case of Pisces, we have egos there who are incarnating, spiritual egos incarnating, at a time which appears very unfavorable but was perhaps useful for them. Entering the Aquarian phase now, we're going to have different egos incarnating. Those who were during the Piscean age will be left out in abeyance until a new period comes up that's favorable for them to run what they need to run. This is a very slow process, the unfoldment of a humanity, and we need to go through different states of consciousness and different galaxies influencing us depending on where the Earth, the axis of the Earth is pointing to. This axis is imaginary. We don't have an axis pointing there. This is the way the inclination of the planet is, which is 23 degrees. Why? Because the influences are received through the poles. Those are the magnetic poles. Being magnetic, they of course trap cosmic energies. So this is how the energy is received, through the poles. Now we're entering the Aquarian age, and we see changes in mentality and in many other concepts which are quite remarkable. Real changes are taking place, and which makes the world look completely different than what it was, say, more than 50 years ago. completely different. In 50 years, in fact, we have moved in mentality, in technology, and in every conceivable aspect 10 times more than we did in the 1,950 years before that. Why? Because of the aquarian influence, which is beginning to impact on our planet, and because of the new egos that are coming into incarnation, the new souls incarnating. This business of the human love, the human consideration for others, starts with the family, where we treat our relatives in normal families, with normal people. We treat our children and so on with a great deal of love and consideration. Older brothers help their younger brothers any way they can. They are their pets, so to speak, and they treat them with love and consideration. This extends only to the family for the moment, but for a while it wasn't like this. When we're living in caves, this doesn't exist. The concept of family and the help we owe to the members of our family, especially the younger ones, is something that's natural in us in every civilized country of the world. Now this needs to be extended, because this idea of just doing the best we can for our family is not enough. Everyone is our family. We're all human beings, and we all have the same hopes, the same needs, the same desires, the same urges. Doesn't matter where we come from, what we look like, what culture we belong to, we all want the same things. We want respect, we want to be safe, we want to be loved, we want to be considered. This doesn't matter where you come from. It's the same for every one of us. If for one moment we bring all our flags down, all our nationalities down, and look at each other as citizens of the world, we will have given one big step beyond, one big step ahead, something that we need to do. It's okay to love your country. It's fundamental. It's okay for your country to have a flag, to have a sense of nationality, where you belong. This is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But it does not exclude others. It should never exclude others, and it should never go above, consideration for others out of a sense of nationality, a sense of individuality, a sense of culture that we have. We have a culture that we try to respect, by which we live. Respecting other people's culture when they're different from ours is fundamental. It's essential. That's a step to peace. This is a fundamental thing to do. We cannot just avoid that. Something that has happened which has been pretty significant has been the economic interdependence. In the past, it was okay that countries would, compete against each other, trying to ruin against each other economically so as to gain themselves. This, of course, brought about wars and all kinds of problems. We cannot do that. The growth of the human population and the unfoldment of technology brought about a considerable amount of unfoldment in the economic part as well, which brought about, in turn, interdependence, outsourcing, of setting up, especially in the United States, factories in China, for instance, to produce products which are, used in the United States or in other countries, which the United States exports to, has become, a method, a way of life, fundamentally. This business of interaction between the countries, economic interaction, is important. Why? Because today it's impossible to assume that we can ruin another country. Say Japan is a great competitor, with the United States, their products and so on, especially cars and that. They have excellent cars, the Japanese, and so on. So it's looked upon, competitiveness, very difficult to deal with and so on. But this forces us into excellence. This forces us to produce better cars, better products, so as to be able then to compete effectively, with Japan and any country that will be competing with us. At the same time, if we ruin Japan by competing over them and then overshadowing their products, in whatever method we have, it's practically impossible, but let's assume we do that, and we ruin, then Japan will never buy anything from us. They will be ruined economically. So the welfare, economic welfare of other countries, in this case South America, countries in Europe, and so on, other parts of the world, the well-being, the financial well-being of those countries is fundamental for the United States to be prosperous, to keep prosperity going. Otherwise, it will have no one to buy its products. So, it's common sense. Interdependence, economic, has really unified the world in many ways. But probably the most fundamental instrument to unify the world and to get us to know each other much better has been internet. Well, those of us who have internet have, realized that our life has changed completely. Our way of looking at life, our way of looking at the world, our way of looking at other countries, other races, other people, has increased exponentially. 1,000%. Unbelievable. Now we know what our countries are all about. Just 2 or 3 touches on the keyboard of our computer will bring us to Egypt, will bring us to India, will bring us to Japan, to Germany, to South America. No problem there. Not only can we buy products from them through the internet, but all the information from the world we can get from them through the internet. The internet is really the unifying tool that we have had. It's an electronic blessing in that sense. We've begun to know each other much better because of it, and it's something that should be stimulated by all means. Thank God technology is progressing, and let's assume that this progress will be for the betterment of everyone. Because technology can be a dangerous thing as well, especially in the field of technology, in the field of electronics. It's no telling to what extent we can, in the unfoldment of computers, that may be used by people which are intelligent, but with no ethics, for their own selfish benefit and doing damage to others. That danger is always there. But mankind has to make a step forward. We cannot stop into fears of that nature. We have to take the necessary risks. We have to. And then face the consequences when we not use the knowledge in an appropriate way. That is the only way that we learn, when we pay for the consequences of our mistakes. But to stop advancing out of fear of the dangers involved is not the most adequate thing to do. I think it's profoundly mistaken. There are many people who advocate that and say that it's too dangerous to delve too much into computers and electronics. I think that that's a mistake. If we develop certain things that will be misused by a few, those few will pay for the consequences. And those who are forced to pay for the consequences when it's not their fault will be compensated by karma. Because karma is a law of compensation. We will give to each one what everyone deserves and nothing else. This is fundamental to understand. The future for the next 2 sub-races that we have, and the next 2 races, root races that we have, lies ahead of us. But let's understand this and understand it once and for all and very clearly. It depends exclusively and only in us. There is no intervention from anyone. Interventions on the way humanity functions is forbidden. We need to unfold by ourselves. We have the information, we have the means, we have the resources. All we need is the goodwill, the determination, the patience, and to move towards the objective. The objective is a better world, an illumination of consciousness, unfoldment of consciousness. The 6 root rays will bring about intuition, in the long run replacing the concrete mind, using a much abstract type of mind, and it will be fundamentally intuitional. And the 7th root rays, we don't know what distance that is because we have never been given the figures, Well, that will develop the willpower, the creative will, the ability to create, just using our mind. That we will be different by them physically, in all likelihood. We have to remember that 15 million years ago, the human body measured in the male 15 feet tall. And it was pretty much primate, monkey-like, essentially. Not descending from monkeys, as we said before, monkeys descend from us. We explained that in lesson number 7. But it was pretty much, monkey-like. And as you know, through the millions of years it went shrinking down, losing hair, a bigger head and so on. Most likely we will be very small in size. We will have lost all our hair and everything. Most likely it will be physically very different in the 7th root race. And I suspect, and it's a personal suspicion, that we will probably have only, by more or less the middle of that period, we will start losing the density of the physical body, and it will become only etheric. But that is not something that you should take into account, because it's my own supposition, and it has no value from that standpoint. It's not something that I have been told. It's not information that I've received from any source. It is something that I think perhaps is common sense. Why? Because the first root races we had, the first periods we had, the polar and the second root race, Hyperborean, we had subtle bodies. We didn't have flesh bodies, as you will remember. If you go back to lesson number 7, you will remember that those two first root races, first two periods, which together lasted about 40 million years, we had only subtle bodies, made of astral matter in the polar and the etheric matter in the Hyperborean, invisible to the eye. So, most likely, the principle is, in the universal manifestation, that whatever starts at a very subtle level goes into denser and denser matter, reaches a maximum amount of density, and then it starts losing density and gaining subtlety. If we follow that pattern, most likely the last human bodies that we will have during the 7th root race will be, for more or less the middle of the race ahead, etheric only. By then we will have developed, 7 senses, so to speak, and we will be at the threshold of divinity as a human group, as a humanity, poised now to serve those who are evolving behind us, the humanity of the future, which is now mainly in the animal kingdom and the other lower kingdoms of life. This is the idea. So, all this will be eventually achieved. How much pain will be involved for us to achieve this depends on us. One of the things that we need to understand, after 2,000 years of being told the opposite, is that our redemption comes as a result of our own efforts. To assume that somebody can come over and clean us, or that we're going to have someone with a broom sweeping out all the garbage that we're throwing behind us as we walk, is a great mistake. And one of those who gave us theosophy, the Master Kultur Mila Singh, said it very clearly in a letter to Mr. Sinat. How wonderful it would be if we had sweepers behind us cleaning the garbage that we're throwing. That thing doesn't exist. We have to clean our own garbage. The whole thing is in our hand, my brothers. It's never been in anyone else's hands. It is our brothers. We get where we go by functioning properly. We have been told what to do. We have been indicated the right thing to do and the right thing to avoid. We have the bodies to think with, to feel with, and to act with. And we have the laws of nature. And we have the planet, our home in space. We have everything we need. But the effort to achieve what we need to achieve has to come from us. No one is going to get it for us. There's no one to do it. And there's no one willing to do it either. We have to do it. It's our job to do. We want to unfold, we have to do the work. It's as simple as that. One final observation here, which I think is particularly useful, concerning one of the fundamental virtues that we need to have if we really want to become one with everyone else and achieve this noble purpose of the fraternity of humanity. And it is compassion. This is an important thing, to understand the process and to really get to where we need to get. In one little book that Madame Blavatsky wrote after The Secret Doctrine, which is a masterful little book, magnificent, it's called The Voice of the Silence, which is a kind of something strange, because silence, voice is usually noise. So in this case, the voice of the silence is a profound metaphorical meaning. And then we read there. It was translated from the book of Golden Precepts, which is something that Blavatsky did. That book was written apparently in Sansar, a very old language, sacerdotal language, which apparently Sanskrit came from. So, but she had mastered it. She learned it in Tibet, and then she translated the book, which is very, very, very old, one of the oldest manuscripts in the world, perhaps. And she says, "Hast thou attuned thy heart and mind to the great mind and heart of all mankind, Compassion, a virtue taught by both the Buddha and the Christ, is the last great virtue that must be completely attained by every aspirant. To be in full accord with all that lives, bear love to men as though they were thy brother pupils, the disciples of the one teacher, the sons of one sweet mother, is demanded of the earnest pilgrim of the age-old path. No one of us knows where he is on this path in relation to any other. We have been where the least spiritually developed now struggle. We shall be where the spiritual giant moves. In between are innumerable gradations, not fixed points of progress, but rather stepping stones to a greater achievement. Therefore, it behooves us to judge one another. We share a common source, a common struggle, and a common destiny. This is the stark reality which, as yet, mankind has not realized in sufficient numbers to bring peace to a sorely troubled world. The test of the human brotherhood is a severe one, but man has still another test of brotherhood to face, that of his oneness with all life, in whatever form it may be manifesting. He is the elder brother of other kingdoms of nature, and therefore he is karmically responsible for his exploitation of the total resources of nature and of the animal kingdom in particular. For anyone who accepts the validity of the concept of the one life, there can be no compromise over the deliberate infliction of pain or other cruelty to animals. Reverence for all life usually becomes an increasing motivation towards an ethic of harmlessness for those who endeavor to apply theosophical principles to their lives. Again, in the voice of the silence we find the passage, compassion speaks and saith, can there be bliss when all that lives must suffer? Shalt thou be saved and hear the whole world cry? These words are spoken as the enlightened soul reaches the end of the journey and can, if he so elects, to be released from the wheel of rebirth. But the voice here asks if the soul is content to leave his fellow men suffering. For here he makes a choice either to cross the gate to freedom or hearken the voice of humanity, and return to hell, to remain unselfish to the very end. Compassion is the last virtue to be called upon before freedom is attained. Knowledge can be used for good or evil, but compassion has no choice. It hears the call of life and gives succor. Every step based on compassion is a right step. The practice of brotherhood is a true expression of our egoic awareness of the unity of life and of our own roots in that oneness. The Master KH, who gave us theosophy, one of them gave us theosophy, wrote this to Mr. Alfred Sinnett, his correspondence in India between the years 1880 and 1884. He says, the Master, the term universal brotherhood is no idle phrase. Humanity in the mass has a paramount claim upon us. It is the only secure foundation for universal morality. If it be a dream, it is at least a noble one for mankind, and it is the aspiration of the true adepts. My brothers, it's been a pleasure having received the blessing of being able to share these ideas with you, which I hope will have a practical effect on your lives. Normally it does. If you study these lessons, if you go back to them, eventually they become a part of your life, and they become a part of the proper way of living life. Life is a difficult proposal, we all know that. We go through sufferings and difficulties. It is not having problems the problem. Problems we always have, whether we create themselves or they are created for us by others. It's how we face the whole thing, how we focus on those problems, the manner in which they affect us, for good or for bad. Learning these lessons these principles of life, the laws and parameters that rule our evolution is essentially and consequently very important. We take our life in our own hands when we do that. And we will face our difficulties and problems and pains with a much better disposition than before, with a higher, perhaps loftier purpose. That's the idea behind it. Thank you very much for having followed these videos, which I hope will be useful to everyone. May God be with you.